So we're ready to call to order the Board of Aldermen regular meeting for today, which is Thursday, July 2nd, 2020. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Alderman Peters for the invocation.
All right.
May we stand? Bless this town and may it remain a beautiful and friendly place to live. We pray that this board makes fair and informed decisions tonight. We also pray that our police officers, firefighters, and members of our armed services here and around the world remain safe as they risk so much for our security. We also pray that our town be spared the ravages of hurricanes and other natural disasters, and that everyone associated with the town remains safe and secure. And I would also ask that you be with our attorney Brian during this period where he has lost his brother, and may God be with him and his family. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'd like to recommend a change to the agenda, in our consent agenda. I'd like to go ahead and remove the minutes that are in there. I went through them. I've talked to the clerk regarding this. There's a bunch of typos that seem to have crept up in there from being saved from Word into a PDF. And pull those out only so that we can act on them separately, at which time we can approve them subject to the correction of those typographical errors.
Okay.
So that's my motion.
Let's second the motion for the agenda, then let's amend it.
Okay, do we have a second for the agenda?
Second.
Okay, and
Now,
that's,
now we accept your amendment, and I would like to take the, also amend the agenda to move the finance report to continuing business, I guess. And would also like to add a closed session to our agenda.
okay, so we have a motion with the following changes. One would be to remove the minutes from the consent agenda and conditionally approve them. And then the other one would be to pull the finance report into continuing business, and third, to add a closed session.
I'm not sure we did this right. I always thought you made the changes, attorney.
That's about to check.
Yeah, I always thought you made the changes. You didn't approve the agenda, then make the changes. You made the changes to the agenda, and then you approved the agenda in the form of a motion, a second, and all say aye. Am I right or wrong here, Brian?
It's correct. You approve the agenda, and then when you get down to the consent agenda, if there's something on that you want to pull off, all it takes is one person's request to pull that off the consent agenda.
When we get to the consent agenda. Okay.
But if we're at the approval of the overall agenda, it would be appropriate to make a motion to add a closed session, and I would ask if you to state the grounds, and if you need to talk to me about making sure we have the right grounds. When we go into closed session, we're going to have to identify the grounds for going into closed session.
Personnel discussion.
But at this point, it would be a motion to amend the agenda to add a closed session to discuss specific personnel.
Brian, we also wanted to discuss some of the town real estate. I don't know if that has been called out.
Rule on that is if anyone asks for the address of the property, we have to give the address of the
That's right.
property.
We talked about that.
So I would say to confer with the town attorney to discuss potential contract negotiations. If there's preserve the attorney-client privilege as well as specific personnel. So is there a motion to amend the agenda to add a closed session?
Yes, sir.
Discuss those items. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Madam Clerk?
Was the motion from the mayor
I don't,
or Mayor Pro Tem?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you.
Is all in favor on adding the closed session?
I,
And then from what I understand, what you just said, Brian, is we'll address the consent agenda items as we get to them.
Yes, ma'am. Unless everyone agrees to approve the consent agenda, any one elected official may pull an item or more than one item off the
we
consent.
just pulled that. Yeah, we just pulled mine then.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda would be the manager's report.
Okay, we'll start with the capital improvements and particularly the fire station. I believe the board has recognized that as we set our priorities, that the replacement of the fire station is our top priority. As you know, it's in deplorable condition. We met Alderman Benson, Alderman Grant, the chiefs, and myself to review all of the capital projects and to try to set those priorities. We decided basically to go ahead and move on getting some sense of how much money would be available for us to borrow or to bond if in fact we go ahead with all of the various projects that we have going on. With respect to the fire station, a defense grant application went in last Friday, prepared by India, Laura, and Caitlin, where we asked for $3 million total. It would probably be a 50-50 match. So if we were to be awarded that grant, we would be looking at $1.5 million. The grant was put together in probably record time, and I again thank Mr. Leonard for putting us in touch with the correct people at Camp Lejeune to get the commander's endorsement of our project, which we in fact did get and got the grant request in on time. I have no way to assess whether or not we'll be successful in getting that, but we have jumped through a lot of hoops to get into position to get it. Barring that, we will continue to look for additional grant money, including FEMA grants or anything that would address the firehouse. In addition, we need to find hopefully off-island storage for the police department's records and evidence. The containers that are holding some of this information now are leaking and moldy, and so we need to move fairly quickly on that. And we are considering several different property options, which I imagine the mayor will give us a little more information on later. These include a couple of buildings in Sneeze Ferry, and of course, the possibility of selling some of our surplus real estate to finance some of these projects as well. In regards to the federal project to restore the, what would actually be phase 5 of the beach, that $237 million project with a huge cost share on our part. Again, we're going to have a meeting on July the 7th with the Army Corps of Engineers, various elected officials to get a better feel for what the actual numbers are for both the project and the renourishment that will have to go on over the next 50 years. Again, with direction from board members, I have contacted DEC Associates. It's an accounting firm that has in the past worked with the town to arrange financing and to give us advice on financial issues. We've been asked to provide documentation, budgets, audits, and whatever. They'll be back with us right after the meeting occurs with the federal people to discuss how we'll proceed or how we'll proceed to contract with them to do this financial analysis. So we're moving ahead as quickly as we can on the capital projects, but again, the firehouse is number one on the list, and we'll move as quickly as we can to get that done. Other items, the revetment, again, the engineers, oh, I'm sorry.
Before we leave that, do we let him finish? I've got a question on what you just said, I think. Mike and I were probably gonna answer the same
No,
question.
go ahead.
Okay. We talked about having the analysis done, just so, because we couldn't have more than two of us there for the meeting.
Right.
Is one of the things we would like to have done, I think we talked about it before, was find out exactly what financial obligations the town can take on. Whether it's by, because I think one of the things on the Phase 5 project, one of the things that I've seen posted is that people think it's a free project because they say it's a federal project. But we would have to take on a substantial amount of debt. Okay, you've also got the groin as a potential project. You got the firehouse, you got, the police issue, all that stuff. And the idea would be to have them come back and say, this is how much you can borrow.
Correct.
This is how you have to borrow it. Okay, this is, you'd have to have a grant for this, you have to have cash for that. So then we look at that and we say, okay, this is our obligation. What we've talked about is we don't want to get ourselves in a position where we sign up for a project and we're one and done for the next 25 years because we can't take on any more financial obligations. So I would defer, I think Mr. Benson's got a comment along those lines too, I'm assuming.
No, I wanted to talk about the federal project.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
go ahead.
Then we'll move right on, the revetment, the Arundel engineers, they did some drone work out there. I provided only Mr. Benson with some of the initial response, but I do not yet have the operational. Yes, sir.
David, if we may come back to the financing aspect, is
Certainly.
there any alternative with Golden Leaf Foundation? Is there anything?
It's certainly possible. I haven't yet explored that.
Okay.
Um,
I thought Brian had been exploring that area before.
For town hall, I think.
For town hall.
Yes, I did for the mitigation improvements at the town hall. I've gone through his Golden Leaf file. I didn't see anything on the firehouse, but
Okay.
that doesn't mean he didn't do it, because it dates back to 2016, the original drawings and proposals. So, but I will, certainly exhaust every grant possibility we can come up with as we, get further along on this project.
I guess my thought is the fire department's relatively new, so therefore Brian would not have been researching that much, I guess, but okay.
I know somebody did, because the proposals that I had were from 2016 and 2017.
Okay.
So if it wasn't Brian, perhaps the manager prior to him had done some work on it.
Okay. Perhaps, well,
Yeah.
I just throw it out.
Yeah, I'll dig further through the files. There's boxes of them. So,
And just to follow up on Mr. Peters, one of the things we talked about is when they're looking at how we do things, it should be grants, it should be every avenue that we have for funds. And I know you talked about potential, if we only got half of the firehouse money,
Right.
looking for the other half as a grant rather than just a loan. And that we should be looking at, and I think it goes back to making sure that our constituents understand doing a project where you're taking on debt is not a free project. Okay, that's like buying a house with a mortgage.
sure.
You don't get out of it for free. So the more grants we can get, to your point, the better financially we're gonna be and the more projects we can do. Because I think you brought up the Golden Leaf specifically in our meeting, I believe. Somebody did, maybe it was.
Yeah, I don't recall. As far as the revetment, the sandbag project will go on. I'm expecting their operational plan within the next couple of days. The town park repairs, I'm sure you've all driven by it. I think it looks terrific
That was
myself.
fantastic.
Yeah, they striped the one parking lot, I believe today, and sealed the other. The only things, as far as I know, that remain to be done are the resurfacing of the basketball court and the tennis courts. That is supposed to occur on Monday. And then they've recommended that we not open the park for sometime thereafter, just to allow all that to stabilize, as well as the sod. Scott will be getting us some keep off the grass signs to put out there for when we do open the park, because the sod will not root for some time, and we don't want people messing it up at this point. But we would like to get it open so people can use it.
I'd like to make a comment about that.
Yes, sir.
They just put the second set of sod down on the tennis court side. That stuff's really soft, they're irrigating it constantly. I really think we need to put some temporary major stakes and yellow tape across as close to the road as we can, because people are gonna pull in there tomorrow and Saturday and tear that sod up. So I think just for emergency purposes to protect our investment, which, quite extensive for the park, so. I mean, I know it's gonna happen, and we don't
Good
protect it somehow from people just pulling off the road into the side area.
Deb saying use your back local voice.
Again, on the federal project, which we can talk about, Mr. Benson, but
When you turn your head, I can't hear you.
the financing terms, they tell me are not negotiable. It is an adjustable rate mortgage, basically, with the interest rate being adjusted every 5 years. We would be, if we accept their deal as it exists, financing a little over $16 million for 30 years. Again, with that interest rate adjusted every 5 years. Mr. Benson had suggested, and they initially rejected, but then told me that they can reduce the template of the sand by about 20%, but it would cause approximately a 9-month delay. They have to go back to their costing people to rework everything, I guess. They are not clear on the renourishment costs, and that's one of the things that they're supposed to be able to nail down a little bit for us on this July 7th meeting. We should look forward to hearing that. And if we should choose to withdraw from the project, the Surf City portion would go back to Congress and probably be delayed by about a year for them.
Just because, and I understand the renourishment side of it, but because of people listening, that's additional commitment that we'd have to make beyond the $16 million.
Yes, sir.
And so that would be part of the financial analysis too. So every, and I don't remember what the years are, we actually have to put more money into the project.
That's correct. It goes on for about 50 years all total. I believe
Five,
it's-
50 years?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And
It never goes away.
On that same, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dave, what's your sensing relative to how Surf City feels? I know we've all got this sort of feeling of sticker shock over the new
Sure.
/ final
Yeah.
costs of phase 5. And I know they didn't just go up for our side of it, they went up also for Surf Cities. Do we have any kind of sensing on, are they all in, or they're pushing forward?
It sounds to me like they're all in. The board here and the governing body over the years has done projects. You've done phase 1, you've done phase 5, you took on debt with the USDA loan. Surf City has done nothing for a long time, so they've built up a bit better, bigger war chest, shall we say, than we have. So I think they're fairly confident on being able to make the initial payment or pay the project. I'm not sure where they plan to come up with the renourishment money over the next several years, because it's a pretty substantial sum. But when you look at Surf City, of course, they have the off-island piece of the town, a large commercial district, developments going on everywhere. So perhaps they have some revenue projections that that I don't have access to.
Now, I know, let me follow it up with one question, I know that you're coordinating and discussing with Corps of Engineers and getting questions asked and answered. So, has anyone asked the question or thought to ask the question of, okay, we go ahead and we do the initial construction, and I know we've talked about this amongst ourselves, and come 5 or 7 years, whatever that first rollover is for the maintenance cycle, can we just say no? If it's not feasible to fund it at the time, can we say no, we'll catch the next one? Can we do that?
I don't believe so.
But I do believe that both towns raised a concern about that specific scenario when we met with the Port in Surf City a couple weeks ago. They didn't really answer that question.
That's the question I'm gonna ask on.
Yeah. We need to get that answered.
Yeah.
Is, when we signed the PPA agreement, is it a 50-year PPA agreement? agreement, or is it
Well,
for
they're supposed to give us
the
a draft.
first
We haven't seen it.
contract?
Yeah.
And they'll have a new PPA agreement for the second and a new for the third.
Well, because part of that is that, you know, we sit in this room and we make decisions about, yeah, you know, let's just say, yeah, we're gonna do it. You know, 30 or 40 years from now, people, when we're all long gone, people are gonna be having to continually pony up, and, you know, we get to a point where we lose a lot of control of our destiny, I think, financially, if we can't do these one at a time, in terms of agreement and authorization. Yeah, we're having to sign up for the whole shebang. You know, we've completely lost control of a huge portion of our treasury and our budget.
I'm glad you brought that up, Alderman, because I did some more, math work on that, and, Manager Gilbride's talking about, you know, the, renourishment costs, and you just mentioned that. Well, let's just assume it's $14.8 million. That's our, renourishment cost for each cycle. There's 6 cycles.
I'm sorry, that's our, or the total for
No,
everything?
no.
That's just our share?
No, I don't, that would be our share, okay? Now, to raise, if we kept the 15 cents in the beach fund, and so we kept that as it is, and just for the federal project, we would have to raise the beach fund tax, 25.7 cents to go along with the 15.71 cents. So our beach tax would be 41 cents, and our general fund tax, whatever, it's 26 cents right now. So our beach tax would be twice what our general fund tax is, to come up with enough money to cover those renourishment cycles. And Surf City is gonna be an even worse situation, because their portion, according to the figures we were given, and this is, you got this as a retreat, this is not anything new. I just extended it out. I got $22 million to cover between renourishment cycles. So, I mean, that's, if we could get the construction going, but if this renourishment cost, if this is really true, it's just undoable.
No, we're dead in the water.
It's
We're dead in the
undoable.
water.
It's
We'll
one
never
and
do
done.
anything else but that.
It's
Yeah,
one and
it's
done.
undoable.
And it just, yeah,
So I'm just saying, we need to be asking these questions
agree.
on Tuesday morning, and I think it's gonna be a virtual conference, meeting for everyone.
Yes,
if I can just add a couple of things to what, you know, to what both the aldermen said, is one is, and look, I'm not doubting the numbers, but that's a one and done. I mean, that's, you know, I think, without being a financial person, although I spent my life doing a lot of that stuff, is based upon the budgets that I've seen, okay, we're done. You know, if taking on the commitment that Mike had talked about. The second thing is, if I remember correctly, I've been told you can't, when you're borrowing against sand, you're gonna have to put money down. So it's not just that we're gonna have to come up with the first year's payment. Under the other one, it was what, 3 years, Mike? That had to be out front. So all that kind of stuff, when you're talking the financial analysis stuff, is to look at stuff like that. But I think, you know, that's the whole thing. You know, you buy a car and you find out the maintenance on that particular model is 10 times what the cost of the car is. You don't buy the car because of the maintenance. And
Right.
if we've got that kind of commitment on the nourishment stuff going forward, you know, it's just, you know, our total budget is what, $10 million from everything. You know, this is a huge, and honestly, I don't know, and I think everybody here is more familiar with it than I am. We also have a solvency test that we have to go through before we can borrow money. And it's hard to imagine taking on that kind of debt with the renourishment in there and being able to.
We'll have to go
But
back
I
up to
think
the
that's-
LGC, and we'll have to plead our case.
Right.
And you go to the LGC, it's a room about this size, it's a conference room up in Raleigh, and there's a big table in the middle, and the state treasurer sits at the head of that table. And you have to plead your case, and they have to approve it. In the case of both of the last 2 times we were there, they approved it unanimously, but it was after a lot of hard questions were asked and answered. And,
well, when I spoke to the Carters, they indicated that because this was federal financing, it might not require LGC approval, but that if we were to take on that kind of debt, anything else we ever wanted to do would be out of the question from the LGC, so, just something to
So
keep
it's the
in
same
mind.
thing. It's a one and done is what he
So
says,
just,
right?
but just so everybody knows too, we're continuing to try and contact other people who might be able to offer us
Correct.
some assistance
Sure.
in the way of,
Yeah.
financial aid. Like I had spoken to Mr. Rouser, his office had contacted me back and said somebody would be getting back in touch with us. I wanted to talk with you, Tom, about maybe seeing if we could get with, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, we need to hurry up
So-
and do that. He's almost done.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah, so since you know
We
him
do that.
personally, maybe we can just get that scheduled.
Yeah.
So we are, and he was actually quite surprised when I went through the situation with him, because they worked so hard to get the project
Sure.
approved. And I had thanked him for that and definitely expressed our desire that it is something we'd like to move forward with. But that it, from inception to today, the project had just skyrocketed in cost because of the different factors out there. And that we're struggling being a small town that we are.
Sure, and just, well, two items just to keep in mind as we go through this is that whatever we do on this federal project, we're only dealing with the southern 4 miles of the beach, so that any hurricane event or whatever that impacts the Cobra Zone or Phase 1, we would have to come up with the money for, and you know, it's just something to
There's no
keep in mind.
financing right now for the one.
Yeah. The other thing to mention is that the meeting, which was to be held at the Welcome Center in person, is now going to be held virtually because the Corps of Engineers cannot, I guess they were forbidden to get people together because of the COVID resurgence. We will have information for how to sign on, but the only concern I have is that if we have 2 board members who are participating and talking, any other board members would have to be muted or whatever. Otherwise, we have to notice a public meeting, and of course, it's not a public meeting, so I'm not exactly sure how to handle all that. Perhaps the clerk could chime in or the attorney.
Well, that, we can discuss that in closed session, because that would be legal advice, and we
I see.
can discuss that in closed session.
Okay.
There are some logistical concerns in the neighborhood of what you're talking about.
Great. Moving on to the town hall, the preparation of the plans is going on. We should have be ready to go out to bid in less than 60 days, probably about 45 days. I talked to Mr. Stumbo about us doing the roof now rather than replacing that tarp, which was, I sense is what everybody would prefer that we do. He is going to provide me Monday or Tuesday with the specs that they were going to use to go out to bid, so that we can go out, approach local contractors and get that done ourselves. So we'll
I
get
was
that
under
underway
the-
quick.
I'm sorry, but I was under the impression the tarp was really not serving a purpose in that we don't have water coming in. So do you guys know if that's true? No, not sure.
What I heard was the reason we had to put the tarp on was because it was a leak over the manager's office space.
Well, that figures.
Well, definitely, if we could get the specs, because there are several
Yeah.
local vendors, maybe we could just get moving with the roof.
But if it is, I guess we need to determine if it's still leaking, because if it is, we need to put tarp on temporarily, because it's gonna take a while to get a contract on it.
If it was leaking and we didn't put a roof on it, then it's still leaking.
It's not like a scab,
So
right?
2 and 2 is 4.
Yeah, it's not like when
I know, I guess
it's
what-
and it forms a scab, right? Exactly.
What
Okay.
I'm saying is, what I was told was that we had proactively put the tarp
Right.
on, but that it wasn't really serving a purpose. Mr. Benson sounds like he's been told something else, so,
Well, I
you know,
remember.
either
from-
way,
Yeah.
yeah.
From the very beginning, when the storm came through, the leak was in the roof of the manager's office.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. And if you look at where the tarp is, it's over the roof of the manager's.
Well, then I guess we need to, because as you said, even if he gives you the specs tomorrow, by the time we go out to bid for the roof quote, we're gonna still have to put the tarp on.
Like you said, we can get a roof done in a week.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah, well, we'll go ahead and, well, we have the tattered tarp up there now, and we had a monsoon rain event just last week. Have you been in the building and noticed anything? Yeah, because it may only be wind in one direction that causes a problem or something like that, so, well, let me get the specs and we'll take it from
Thank
there.
you, sir.
But didn't the architect recommend keeping the roof and the bid package for the restoration?
Yes, he did.
Because he said it would be cheaper.
Yeah, basically implied it would be less expensive for the town and less aggravation when they do the downspouts and everything else for it.
Well, most roofers also do gutters and downspouts,
Sure.
so, I mean, I guess, to me, it sounds, the roof is something that should be very simplistic to be able to pull out, because that's not gonna be the same contractor that does anything else. He's gonna do the roof, he's gonna do the gutters, he's gonna do downspouts. So I still think it benefits us to get it moving and get something accomplished. I mean, I would at least like to quote it and see.
I don't know what he expected, but my understanding was that we were going to go for a fortified metal roof. And we're gonna ask the Golden Leaf Foundation to cover the extra expense or what the insurance would cover in place of this. It's gonna be expensive, so we have to, if we're gonna look at the specs, we gotta start asking Golden Leaf, here's what we're gonna do.
Right.
You know, can you help us?
Well, they've been pushing us for numbers for some time now, so,
Oh, really?
yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah, so,
Okay.
we'll get that right over to them.
Ms. Meyer?
Florence, oh, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I
Ms.
just
Meyer?
had a question about the roofing. On other projects, aren't there special specifications that anybody that does work on the town hall would have to meet? So do we have local people that still meet all those? I was just curious.
Yeah, most of them probably involve
Bonding and
insurance
stuff.
and
Yeah, I mean,
bonding and that sort of
the,
thing.
the correct level of insurances, general contractors, all of those things, they have to have all of those requirements, just like they would do to put the generator and,
And minority people and things like that.
whatever that package recommends or
Yeah, I think
requires.
it's pretty extensive, isn't it?
It is, yeah, they end up being fairly thick.
Yeah, with a lot of
Yeah,
requirements.
there's even a statement that you're not using any money or material from Iran.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it gets pretty specific, so.
Yeah.
That cuts the pool,
true.
is what I was thinking.
And raises the cost.
Of course. But
The Florence project, I believe Fran Way is on the phone, so I'll let him explain where we're at with the Florence dune restoration project. The dredging of the New River Inlet, nothing's changed. Parking, obviously, we are expecting enforcement issues again this weekend. We'll be well staffed for it, as well as having Steve out there writing tickets. The parking plan, or the paid parking plan rather, continues to move along. I just heard from the vendor today that we will be meeting, I believe on Thursday, to ride the town and develop the last parts of that plan. So it is underway and we would like to get something going pretty quickly. Annexation, I forwarded Mr. Eads a copy of the documents where the General Assembly forbid us from going across the intercoastal waterway to a next property. If in fact we do acquire property on the other side from the police station or the police storage, we would like to be able to do some annexation over there. So if you get a chance someday, maybe you can explain to me
Yeah,
how
we're
we
just
should
gonna-
proceed.
We're gonna, since the prohibition was enacted by the General Assembly, to change that, it's gonna take an act of the General Assembly.
Right.
So we need to start talking to some of our assembly members and see if someone will sponsor an act.
Okay.
We need to put together the justification and the rationale why it's needed.
Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission, they have arranged or are arranging a congressional video conference, and they've asked for the names of 3 people that we would want to have on that conference. I know Mr. Leonard had expressed an interest. I don't know.
I would also.
Okay.
3 elected officials?
They didn't specify elected
You should be the
officials.
third one. Years ago, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be the manager, and I've kind of been the lead guy by default for the Washington stuff. And then it should be the mayor, or what I'd also like to do is kind of looking at this sort of pragmatically in terms of, this would be the same group that once trips to Washington finally do resume.
Right.
That would be the North Topsail Beach group that goes. But we probably ought to identify an alderman in case for some reason somebody can't go. And I would nominate Susan for that.
Okay. Well, I'll provide them with the 3 names, and we'll, assuming everyone's okay, we'll set up the alternate as well.
We can address this in closed session, but that implicates the same concern you had about the other meeting with.
Oh, that's true. Okay, yeah. Okay. Solid waste,
I'm sorry, but just to get back to that then, so I guess we just stick with who we are going to be sending to this specific
Right.
meeting, and we can deal with an alternate later.
Yeah,
exactly. Solid waste, I think I mentioned this during the budget conference, but the tipping fees at the Onslow County landfill went up 40% this year. They claim that, you know, it hadn't gone up in years, but that doesn't make it any easier to swallow an increase in the fees. And it is, however, the only fee we increased this year. So it really didn't have much choice. Condemnations, I probably picked a very bad word. What basically my problem is that we have some abandoned homes that are becoming shelters for various critters as well as potentially people. We would like to be able to act or to move against some of these properties to either get the owners to do something with them or to be able to tear them down and start over. I'm not sure what that whole process is, and again, I would rely on the town attorney's advice before I do anything, so as not to get into any trouble.
That type of condemnation is completely separate condemnation than when you're condemning, the town's condemning property to obtain it in the town's name for public use.
Right.
That is a public safety issue. It's driven by the general statutes. Mr. Kennedy is well aware of those. We've talked about them in the past. That will require board action to allow us to go forward. Well, actually, I'd be more comfortable with board action, or at least a consensus that that's what they want us to go for.
Okay.
And Ms. Hill knows a lot about those condemnations as well.
I think it would be my preference that we at least reach out to those owners first
Oh, yeah,
and see. I know
sure.
some of them are bank owned, they may be getting ready to put them up for foreclosure, that sale, or they may not ever have a plan. So I think that's something we need to know.
And the statutes are designed to give the owners and all those with an interest in the property, which would include a mortgage or a bank, plenty of notice and opportunity to be heard before you
Perfect.
start tearing things down.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, and Deb, if you know otherwise, let me know, but I believe Jimmy has reached out, attempted to reach out to these record property owners on
Yes.
several occasions.
Okay, well, perhaps you and I at some point can get together and I'll get a better feel for the procedure to go about this so we don't step on any landmines.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you, John. Mag's Head has had a lot of experience in this area of condemnations and things. So you may want to give the town manager there a call. He has kind of advised, I think, the town in prior instances, but their experience has been rather,
Yeah.
well,
Well, but that's because I think I know which lawsuits, and there were a litany of them. They were condemning or attempting to condemn oceanfront properties because they were beneath the mean high water mark. There was a whole bunch of litigation over that actually led to a piece of legislation that and Frank Rush, when he was the manager of Emerald Isle, got Representative McElrath to sponsor to make sure we had the right to at least enact beach equipment ordinances. But Alderman Peters is right, that got real expensive real fast.
Yeah.
But those were not unsafe buildings, they were buildings and structures that were literally in the wet sand.
Right.
I mean, I'll bring the pictures to the next meeting, it was insane, so.
Okay.
Federal flood maps, I'll defer to Deb for the most part, but we have approved, of course, those flood maps. There is one panel of the map which encompasses just the part of the lower southern section of the town as well as part of Surf City that was not included in the flood map revision and has caused some agita for our residents down there. We're looking at the possibility of severing that piece or the North Topsail piece and getting it worked into the existing flood map to help these people with their insurance costs. But Deb, perhaps if you want to jump in and better explain that for me.
The problem was that with NFIP doing all the maps along the coast, there were several protests and objections during the public comment period that NFIP had to work through. They are still working through those. So rather than hold Onslow County up, they made the decision to let Onslow County go, with the exception of that one part, down at the, Surf City border, that contains quite a bit of the protest on that panel. So it wasn't a town decision. Those panels are, historically determined by FEMA. And that's the process right now. So, the state's trying to work something out with FEMA, and we're trying to work something out with the state to where that we can, bring those people into the, 2020 adoption. From what I understand, it's not gonna be until the fall of 2021 when Pender County is expected for theirs to be adopted.
So what was the issue, Deb, that plats changed from AE to VE? Is that what the issue was?
Some went from VE to AE, some went from AE to VE.
When you say the issue, are you talking about the protest?
I'm talking about if you look at any one property, the flood zone is mostly either AE or VE, and VE has a higher insurance rate, and I assume that the federal flood maps changed some AE homes to VE.
It could be that they changed it from AE to VE. It could be that they weren't in the flood zone to begin with, and now that they are. So in any event, the motivation to protest is if they had to have flood insurance, or if their flood insurance was higher.
But in most cases, my understanding is if you had federal flood insurance today and you're in an AE and you were now in a VE zone, that your insurance is grandfathered through unless it lapses. So it's not necessarily that their insurance is going to skyrocket the day it gets adopted, was my understanding.
And they need to speak with their insurance
person.
agent.
Exactly.
And it's probably gonna be different for private insurers, with property that are in Cobra that have, private insurance as opposed to NFIP.
Yes.
That's basically all I have for a report. A lot of these, I'm sure I try to update you weekly on what's going on, and some of this is just a rehash. Yes, sir.
Can we go back for just 1 second, Dave, and talk about the Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You had mentioned, first of all, that was a really great job y'all did, putting that thing together as quickly as you did. You sent me the letter that the chief of staff of the base had signed. I mean, it couldn't have gotten any better than that in terms of an endorsement. It was really well done. After you and I spoke, I talked to Joe Ramirez at the base. I called him and I thanked him for all their support, and he turned it right back on you and your staff. He said, we didn't really do anything. He said, Dave sent us such a tight package. All we really had to do was endorse it. So y'all did a great job.
That's a nice compliment.
Yeah, and it really was. And, but the one question I have is about the funding. And you had said that, it's a 50-50 match. And I've got it up in front of me and I'm reading it, and it says for non-rural area projects, the state or local government or not-for-profit, must agree to contribute 50%, okay? But then it goes on to define a rural area. And a rural area is being defined as a city, town, or unincorporated area that has a population of not more than 50,000 inhabitants. So as I read that, that's us.
Well,
And
actually,
you're smiling about it.
well, you're
So,
correct, because we ran across that, and, I found it hard to look at us as a rural area. But I know the ladies who did all the work on the project, I just put the stamps on the envelope. We decided to submit it as being part of the rural area. I don't know that we'll get away with that, but the criteria is kind of a little vague there,
Right.
and it seemed to apply to us, so we did try to do that.
okay, well, I hope we get something.
When
So,
yeah.
would the decision timeframe be?
I believe it was October.
Okay, so it's not too long.
No, not
it
terrible.
probably has to do with the federal fiscal, it starts 1 October. And if these are gonna be FY 21 funds, they'll make a decision in FY 21. So, again, that was all, I had a super job on that, Super,
No.
super.
Thank you all.
Thank you, and the credit, like I said, goes to the ladies
Thank you.
who worked so hard.
Thank you.
I
India.
feel it was India, yeah, I can't take any of the credit.
Thank you, India.
Yeah.
Okay, the next up is the open forum.
Mayor, we have one comment submitted. Can everyone hear me? Do I need to project more?
Mr. Peters, can you hear Mark?
Can you hear me okay, Mr. Peters?
You want to put the headphones back on?
Put the headphones back on.
Well,
No?
Okay, Mrs. Rebecca Dixon of 113 Barton Bay Court submitted a comment. Point one, I'm confused on why this meeting is a virtual meeting. The last meeting, which was budget, was held in an open forum. It is very doable to have a meeting in which the taxpayers/residents can attend. Require masks, sit 10 feet apart, etc. If we can grocery shop, go to restaurants, and do other public activities, I'm at a loss as to why our Board of Aldermen have reverted back to virtual meetings. This is illogical. Is it a way to avoid a face-to-face with their residents? Point two, you have tasked intelligent, responsible employees with investigating the parking plan. After listening to many of the virtual meetings and attending almost all of the previous meetings, I don't understand the dilemma of the parking issue. You, the Board of Aldermen, are costing our town tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. Why hire and task extremely knowledgeable employees with parking if you won't act on the recommendations? Quit stalling around and implement the parking passes before the season is a complete loss. Point three, many previous Board of Aldermen have been negligent in protecting and maintaining our town buildings. I'm embarrassed and outraged at the condition of our fire department buildings and how our first responders have had to live while working for our community. I would encourage all residents to inspect the conditions of our fire departments. There needs to be one public safety building in North Topsail Beach on the island where employees can do their job while being safe, clean, and dry, and not worry about the building coming down on them. Police, fire, and rescue need better conditions for working. Act on this using the input of the professionals that you have hired, who are the town manager, fire chief, police chief, public works director. Don't spend a cent on outsider for recommendation. And that's the end of her comment. And that was the only comment submitted.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, then we're gonna move on to the public presentation and hearing. So we've got Mr. Fran Way. Fran, can you hear us?
Yes,
Okay. Do you have an update?
can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Go ahead, Fran.
Sure. And from a coastal engineering perspective, everything's kind of moving forward. The CAMA permit modification is in, and we're working with CAMA to kind of move that forward. The Dorian project, we continue to work a little bit with FEMA now, but it seems like we are onto the FEMA Dorian project is into their kind of the FEMA's environmental review, and it's past kind of the initial review and then the establishment of volume losses and everything and costs. The Florence truck haul bid package, we're just finalizing it now, kind of working with the town attorney to make sure everything's good and dispute resolution and that sort of thing. And that will be issued next week. And then following that, then we'll be with the bid, and then we'll go out to trucking companies and then the nearby fan lines. And then there will be a site visit that's not mandatory, but I'll be up there in a couple weeks after that. So, around July 21st. And then the New River and then Shoreline Management Project, which is, commonly known as the Terminal Growing Project. That's still kind of in a holding pattern because we need to do that. And that's all up to the core. That all the timing right now is unfortunately up to the core. And a large stakeholder meeting is pretty much the next big step, and we can't have that right now due to the COVID-19. And then for, the Florence Category G project, we are making a little bit of headway with the Corps of Engineers to use that bar area to the south, off of, the southern end of Topsail Beach. And that does look maybe like the best way to get an offshore, for the town to use as an offshore bar area. And, that's basically it.
Fran, it's Joanne, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, so my question is going back to the groin. I just feel like this has been on hold forever, and no matter when I ask, and this is not just you, I mean, I've been asking this for years and years and years, when will we be ready to build a groin? And I always hear 3 years. So it seems like we're stuck on hold again, and I'm having a hard time accepting the fact that COVID is the reason that we can't get a large meeting together, because everybody in this world today is using Zoom meetings. So to me, it's not acceptable to hold up the project for that. So I don't know if there's anything there we could offer to do for assistance there, but, we need to keep the project moving. We've got enough issues on our end
Sure.
from a funding perspective, but can't even tell, this thing has taken so long to get out the gate that I don't even know when to plan for that funding to be ready by. And that just kind of goes back to Mr. Grant's point, where we're trying to map everything out and see when we need what funds by and how do we accomplish these projects. So how do we get that moving?
Yep. Yeah, I think we need to, the town needs to, contact Mickey Sugg and pretty much what you just told me, tell Mickey.
Okay.
And that was, and it's much, we have found in general that, you know, even going to those, the long-term MOA dredging meetings, we'll, as coastal engineer, a consultant will show up, and the Corps says, you know, we're saving the front row seats for all elected officials, and consultants kind of sit in the back. So it does really feel like the Corps of Engineers really kind of considers elected officials as kind of the influencers and their bosses, kind of. Obviously, they have real bosses, but so it does seem like just elected officials pressuring the Corps directly is the best way to go.
So can we, Mr. Gilbright, could we please set up a call? And I'd be happy to be on it. I don't know, Alderman Leonard, if you want to be on that? Okay, but let's just see if we can regroup with them and put our heads together on how to keep this project moving forward, because it's not acceptable to just have it just stall.
Well,
Alderman Leonard.
to echo your comments and friends as well, you know, all we're looking for from the Corps of Engineers is the permitting and the analysis. That's all we're looking for. You know, we're still at the very early stage of this thing. That's all they owe us. And it sounds to me more like maybe they just haven't gotten around to starting.
So is the environmental impacts statement part of the,
It goes,
Part
it
of
the
feeds
permitting
into
stuff
that.
That's,
okay.
you know, that's what we're looking for, is preliminary study stuff.
It's the linchpin of it.
Okay, because that's what they're.
But we can't do anything until we get some answers from the Corps, and basically a yes or a no, or we need more information before we can tell you yes or no. And so we really need to engage the Corps to make this a priority.
And the only thing I have set in stone next week would be the Tuesday meeting, once we find out how we're doing that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, anything we lost, Fran?
I had a question for Fran, but we lost him somehow. I found out.
Okay.
My question,
Would you like me to call him on mine?
Those flip phones are just hard to get.
yeah, could you call him real quick?
Look, Laura, running right away.
I say my book.
Hi, this is Fran.
Hi, Fran, I'm sorry, it's Laura.
It's a-
We dropped
it's a
you.
burner
Sorry
phone.
about that.
That's okay.
So Fran, it's Mike Benson. The question that I had, I really wanted to thank you for preparing that template for the Florence category G work that you're going to do and matched it up with the federal project template. And, you know, one of the questions that we had was, is the Florence G work going to increase the size of the dune? Because the template that we saw was just a beach fill, not a dune restoration. So that's kind of the question that I wanted to clarify.
Yes, we have some flexibility with that. We can include a dune, FEMA for the category G engineered beaches. You can either do kind of the berm, which is kind of flat, you know, big, high beach area, or you can do a dune. Usually you do both. You know, it's just even the Hurricane Matthew truck haul project, that was, you know, quote unquote, a berm project for FEMA. So as long as the sand is there, FEMA doesn't care, and so we do have some flexibility on that, including dune or not.
So the follow-up on that, Fran, is, of course, we're thinking about sea oats for the Matthew project, but if you're going to be putting sand in the dune, then we wouldn't be planting sea oats. And the question is, if you did work on the dune, would you make it any bigger than what the FEMA, the Matthew FEMA project is as far as the dune profile? Over?
You know, basically, any kind of dune project, if there isn't an existing vegetated dune, we will never put sand on top of that. And so if the COs did get planted and they were healthy and looked good, we would, you know, basically extend the dune out, put sand from that edge, from the edge of the vegetation, you know, seaward. The dune that the Corps is proposing is very big, and we probably wouldn't be that big. And then the dune from the Matthew project was about, you know, 9 cubic yards per foot, which is a nice dune. The project itself is about 30, what we qualified for is about 35 cubic yards per foot. So we could do a dune about the same size as Matthew, and then we still have, you know, about 20 cubic yards of material that we put out in front of that. So, you know, we could look at that, and a lot of it maybe just kind of depends on, you know, next hurricane season and what kind of erosion we see and how that Matthew dune is going to hold up.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question for Fran?
Thank you, Fran.
Thanks, Fran.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next on the agenda is the consent agenda. So those who had some questions about the consent agenda, do you want to speak up now?
Yes. I want.
That's what I thought.
Me too. You asked, we have it. I reviewed the minutes this morning or this afternoon and realized that it looks like there's some typos that were as a result of a conversion from a Word document to a PDF. What I'd like to do is pull those out of the consent agenda and go ahead and conditionally approve those with the condition being that the clerk go back in and review them for, and just fix the typos. So there are things like, obvious things like everywhere you go, it says town attorney DES and a capital E and Brian's name is left off. And just stuff like that. There's somewhere where instead of saying emergency, it starts with an M, so it's emergency. And so and it's just those kinds of things. There's a couple places where there should be a percent sign after a number that fell off. There's a place where it should say FY and it just has a Y and a space in front of the Y where the F ought to be. So I don't know how to go about this, attorney and clerk, but you know,
Do we need to vote? on
do
that?
we
No, the consent agenda has to be unanimous, so Alderman Williams has to pull it off, so I recommend we put that as new business D.
okay,
Laura,
pull that off, it's new business D,
and just,
Then you have to say it again.
and I'll say all over again.
Okay, anything else on the consent agenda, Mr. Benson?
Yeah, I would like to take the finance report. Ouch.
and put it under new business?
Continuing, well, continuing, I think. I don't know.
I think
It
it would
doesn't
be,
matter to me.
It would be new,
Okay, no.
so that'd
Anybody
be
else?
new business E, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir.
So then do we make a motion to, or need a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of the minutes and the finance report
You can just say as amended.
as amended?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Fine.
all in favor?
aye.
Okay. Committee reports. That we are, that's part of the consent
Yeah.
agenda, so we're good there.
So
Sorry,
we're
just
on,
got sidetracked.
We're on
Continuing business, yep, so we'll start with A, which is the capital improvements update, Mr. Gilbride.
Yeah, actually, most of what would be contained in there, I covered with the manager's report, so if you're content with that, that's fine.
Okay, so then under continuing business, no, you were new business, Tom. Okay, all right, new business. We've got the flood map update, which I believe you also covered,
Also covered,
so
yeah.
we're good there. TISPC appoints, I don't know why mine, oh, this is Mayor Pro Tem, sorry. It says McDermott, now y'all trying to trick me. So appoint citizen representative for TISPC.
Right, there's actually a few places in the minutes where Mayor Pro Tem McDermott the mayor made a motion, the Mayor Pro Tem McDermott seconded. In addition to the drop capital letters, okay. We do need to appoint a citizen representative to the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission since Alderman Meyer has joined us on the Board of Aldermen. At this point, the commission does not meet in July. We're on summer holiday. Our next meeting will be towards the end of August. So I'd like to ask the clerk to put out an announcement for anyone in town who would like to apply for the citizen spot on the Shoreline Protection Commission, to put in an application for that. And I'd also like that notification to ask people to look at the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission webpage, which is tispc.org, and read about the goals, the charters, the accomplishments, to be sure that this is something they really want to get involved in. And I think it's a very worthwhile effort, as Alderman Meyer can tell you, and Alderman Leonard, who's been associated with this for a long time. Alderman Peters, this group has accomplished a lot over the years. So we're just in the position of needing to add a new representative from the town to serve as for the citizens position. That's all I have.
Can I just add one
Yes,
other
sir.
question for Lauren Benson? In the description of that, can you give her some idea of the time involved? That's one of the questions I ask, because people will sign up for stuff. And if they think it's 1 hour thing or it's a 50-hour thing,
Yeah.
that could change it. So if you could give some
Actually,
thought as to what you
Sure.
think that is.
Yeah.
I think that's an
We can do
important
that.
part of it.
we can work on it.
And make sure you include the drive for when the meetings are down at the Topsail Beach Town Hall. Because that adds an hour to the meeting. The round trip.
I always think
Yeah.
everything's 10 minutes and I'm
Yeah.
like, darn it.
No, I'm serious, it does. Sometimes the drive down and back is as long as the meeting.
I think we'll be having virtual meetings for the near future.
Okay, the
Yeah,
next
that was
item,
one.
I'm gonna keep us moving.
Mhm.
The
Good.
next item would be the proposed dune ordinance changes, and that would be Alderman Leonard.
Okay, on the 19th of June, I sent all the board members and the manager, and I believe the clerk and the attorney, a recommendation for some proposed changes to our town ordinance regarding what constitutes sand dune. Article 4, sand dune protection. I asked for input and changes back. I got it looks good from one board member and I think one other, but nothing from anyone else other than the attorney recommended some clarification to paragraph C, and those changes are in here. in the page that was distributed at the beginning of the meeting. The background for this is simple. You know, you got people sometimes that, well, it's not really a dune, it's a berm, or it's a push, or it's a sandbag, and I think that given that every one of those protects what's behind it, infrastructure and homes, every one of those has cost somebody some money somewhere to put there or to maintain, that all of those need to be considered for the purposes of our ordinance as a dune. I just wanna clarify the definition of what a sand dune is, and I wanna clarify it for the purposes of enforcement. Okay, and so I'm not gonna make the motion on this. If I have any questions, I'll take them. Yes, sir.
Just a quick one is I absolutely support that. You walk on the beach, and I can't tell you how many times you even say to somebody, you know, I was talking to someone's on vacation, they actually had all their bags up on the dunes because they thought that protected them. There's no definition. And I'm not talking about spending the money for the signage, but the next time we replace the signage, it shouldn't just stay off the dunes. It should, you know, it's say keep whatever we can do.
Just say get off.
Get off.
Yeah.
Because it's, I mean, one of the guys that walks there all the time, I've seen him go up to people where literally people's kids are standing next to the sign on the dune playing and everything else. And so, no, I support this. I think it's a good idea. I think it was clear before, but I think, you know,
Yeah.
you have to make it so that somebody that doesn't understand what they're looking at understands any kind of stay off of everything up there.
Which
So,
was kind of why in 10-49A subparagraph 1, I
love
wrote, it
that.
shall be unlawful for any person to place any items belonging or beach equipment upon any dune at any time.
I agree.
There was a complaint on social media that people had their lawn chairs up there on a dune, you know, and I get it, and I'm just trying to close the loopholes here.
So I just have one question, Tom. I appreciate the time that you put into this. We had spoken about it after you wrote it, so I was in support of this whole effort. I know that the staff had also gone through the previous ordinance that you just kind of tried to make even more crisp. So my only question would be for staff, are everybody here is good with the way it's worded? Do you think it's going to aid in enforcement?
Oh, it's absolutely fine.
Perfect.
I told Tom it was just much more specific and gave them something to point at when they do issue a fine. The problem with enforcement, well, as you know, the rentals turn over every week, and it's an education process every week, and we can start a policeman at one end of town, and at the end of the day, he hasn't quite made it to the other end. So enforcement is always going to be a problem, but this gives it a little more teeth and a little more something to point at.
And 500 a pop that we can.
Yeah. Mike, you got something, sir?
I think you did an excellent job revising this, and I will make a motion to accept it as you have worded it.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a
Second.
second?
Great job.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yay.
Nice job, nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, the next item, I'm trying to make out my scribble here, but I believe is going to be, Alderman Leonard, your item on the minutes with the conditional approval to remove them.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I don't think I need to restate it for the purposes of this. We know what I want to do and why, and if I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented within what do we call it? Consent agenda that we removed with the condition being that the typographic letters get cleaned up.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I do apologize for that.
It's not a
I'm so
problem.
sorry.
It's just- I'm just
Sorry.
about to talk
That's
to
every
everybody.
little thing.
I'm sorry.
I think you're just trying to see if we're awake by just dropping those first letters.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item would be the finance report.
Okay, the reason I'm bringing this up is I want to try to get some clarification myself, and maybe it will help the board understand where we are. But I'm looking at page 37 of the board packet that you have in front of you. And
Sorry, I'm just catching up with you, I was on
Okay.
35.
All right. And you'll see that our revenue expected was 5.8 million, and we only generated 5.3 million in revenue this past year, so we were short $500,000. But the good thing was, over on page 43, you'll see that, we didn't spend but $4.9 million. So we had an $800,000 surplus. Thank you, Manager Gilbert.
Hey.
So even though our,
Become the
our,
bills.
our revenues did not come in as expected, we were still able to, we still spent quite a bit less. So, you subtract so forth and so on, and you see our contingency fund there has about 314,000. Now, here's the question. That contingency fund was to do just what it did, but we also talked last year, the board last year talked about capital improvements, and I, brought this up at the retreat. So, because we didn't earmark any of this contingency money for capital improvement, now that we've started a new budget cycle, it's my belief that that contingency fund from last year will now become part of our budget surplus in the 220-221 budget. And therefore, we lost the opportunity to have any of that contingency fund carry over for capital improvements.
Doesn't
That's all I'm
it carry-
saying. I'd like clarification from, if we can get clarification from that.
Wouldn't that just stay
We
in the
didn't spend-
contingency fund?
I mean, I'm learning, and I told Mr. Benson this earlier, so it stays, but it moves to the fund balance. So, within a budget, it's my understanding you can budget that in to pull from the fund balance to use for these different types of projects.
Or if we wanted as a board to put it back into the contingency fund, we could vote. So basically it's back, we'll go back into the general fund. And if we as a board want to move it to capital improvements or the beach fund, or leave it in the contingency fund, because how many named storms have we had so far? 3. We could do that as well, correct?
And just one additional comment though. And we were looking at next year. Let's remember, he's got the 1% budget in there for the whole year. Okay, so, and that's about, my recollection, $300,000. Okay, so when we're talking about money, we're assuming that we're gonna get a statute passed that's gonna create $300,000 in revenue for us.
Which might not.
There's your storm 5, right? So, I think that, Mike's right. I think we ought to track the money. But it's also my understanding that I thought the surplus was because we thought some of that money was gonna be spent on some of the projects that didn't get spent. And they just got moved from one year to the other, like town hall, right?
That's somewhat true, yeah. And of course, on the revenue side, they had plugged in the $300,000 from the county, which never materialized either, so.
Which accounts for the vast majority of the shortfall.
Right.
But so the real point here I'm trying to make is our 218-219 budget, we finally had a 66% budget surplus. And the town had been under, I don't know what the LGC calls it, but we were not in good standing with LGC because our fund balance was down around 30-some% or less. We got it to 66, and we were all excited about that. And now this contingency money I'm just talking about, it's gonna make it even higher than 66. But at the retreat, when I was asking about using the fund balance for emergency repairs for the park and the town hall, so we don't want to take money out of the budget surplus because we want to have a good percent in there for the LGC. So I'm just trying to make us aware as a board where the budget stands and really how we are delegating the funds that we have available from the taxpayers.
So
That's the only point I
Just
really
to
want to make.
clarify for everybody listening, Mike, I believe you're on I don't know who's on right now, 45. And you're talking about this bottom line where the, we've got 323,268.62, which puts us at an 86%. That's what you're saying, which gets us up from the 66. So from a town perspective, that's great news in our standing for the LGC. As we go to look at our financials and what projects we want to try to obtain loans for, that is a good thing, right?
Yeah,
So I
sure
think
is.
right now, I understand what you're saying, that each year we need to be looking at it, but I think it's putting us in a good standing right now when there are so many unknowns still going through this year.
And,
Yes,
and
Mr.
just, again, and I don't have my markup on this, I didn't know we were gonna get into this in this meeting. But I understand that that was created because of the timing of projects and not cash going in, okay? Because if I remember, the first run of the budget that we got showed 0 contingencies this year, and it still had the 1% money coming in. So looking at this, and whether town hall got, like, I don't remember, and I wasn't here, was the town hall repairs in the last year's budget?
No,
So there was no money in there for that. How about the park?
not the park. There was some money set aside for fire department, work, but that never ended up I think a little bit of work was done, but they ended up
Wasn't it like $160,000 then? Wasn't that what the?
over $100,000.
Yeah, I mean, all I'm saying is that I think that we have to be, I agree with Mike that anytime we can get some kind of surplus, that's happy to put money away for the storms and everything else. But I'll be honest with you, I look at this year's budget, we've got pop-up and virus now, you don't know what that's gonna do to rental stuff, we hope that it blows out and we have a great year. But I will be absolutely shocked if we get that 1% like we've planned, which is for the whole year. Okay, because that would have to be in the next, no, actually 3 days ago.
Sure.
Right, and we're already not collecting that. So, no, I think it's a good point though, is that
I was just trying to understand, because I'm not sure that what I said is correct, that contingency fund will convert over to the budget surplus. I'm just assuming that it does, because it does not show up in our new budget.
Right.
And the other, so that's all I had on that, unless somebody else. The other point I wanted to make in the finance report, the finance director said that she was looking to close out the FEMA Matthew project so we could get the rest of the money from the state. And that's why I was asking Fran Way that question. We've still got $1.8 million in credit with FEMA. And if we can't plant some COs, we're gonna lose that credit. It's not money we have, but it's money we can apply for. And that's why we've been going back and forth between TI Coastal and Fran. And Fran keeps telling us, well, we can either put sand on the beach, the berm, or we can put it in a dune. Well, I would like to use that 1.7 million and plant some COs. I know it's too late to do it this year, but if we can keep that FEMA open, because we got the sinking fund to cover, but we're not actually getting it.
it's found money.
There's different
It's
types
not
of,
town money.
No,
We have-
found it money. It's found it money. It's money that if we don't use it, we lose it.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's why I want to plant some COs.
I think we can still investigate the COs because I believe that there's different types of COs that you can plant in the different seasons, and I think Kim
But
That's
knows
right.
what they are.
You said
Trying to
that,
get
yeah,
one-
somebody did that before, that they
Right.
said there's ones you can plant
we
all
don't,
season now.
we don't want that kind. The kind we want to plant are planted in the summer.
Well, we also
Those
want to be able to
things.
close out that budget and not have that money just disappear and go somewhere else too. So maybe it's something we could ask staff to
Yeah.
just investigate for
Sure.
us, Mike?
I actually already did. I spoke to Chris Gibson about it.
And what did he say?
The problem was that they, I guess, plant these, or develop these COs in a nursery based on orders that they already have, so that they weren't any available until somewhat later in the summer, I think.
We-
So I'll check back with him again.
You have to pre-order, okay?
Okay.
And he didn't pre-order because there was a question whether we were gonna plant.
Well, we can get an order in now, right?
No, because the growers, it takes several months to produce the liners. It's too late this year, unless some grower has a bunch of plants left over that somebody else didn't take. I'm just saying, yeah, we would probably have to wait till next year to do the planting, and then, to get our money back, it's gonna be next year from FEMA. That's all.
That's a good point.
Palm Express, that's supposed to send it on, put it everywhere, just spread.
Madam
Okay.
Clerk, Madam Clerk, I just want to make sure the record reflect that we have never been in bad standing with the LGC. I believe what Mike Benson, or excuse me, what Alderman Benson, was referring to LGC expressed some concerns about our margins and ability to weather, no pun intended, weather a storm.
The named sword?
But his point's well
Prove
taken.
them wrong.
But being in bad standing is a totally different world,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Them expressing concerns.
All right, so if we move on to the alderman, to the attorney's report.
I have a real quick report. Number one, I want to welcome Ms. Meyer to the board.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And I just wrote it down now, I lost it. House bill, there was a lot of activity in Raleigh this week. There's going to be a lot of bills that are going to be vetoed related to COVID-19, but House Bill 593 did pass, and it deals with the Emergency Management Act, in particular states of emergency. So we're going to have to modify our code of ordinances. The new requirement for a restriction in a state of emergency to be effective is that you're going to have to post the signed declaration on the website, which I think we already do. But then you have to submit it, email it to the NC Department of Public Safety's web EOC portal. I don't know that we do that. I don't even know that anyone's done that, but the Retailers Association drove that piece of legislation. They wanted to be able to go to one database and see what everybody was doing throughout the state. And I think it makes sense. It's just something we're going to have to account for in our ordinances, because if we don't comply with that, you can't enforce the order. And that's for a local declared state of emergency, not an executive order from the governor. Other than that, that's all I have to report, unless anyone has any questions. We have some things to talk about in closed session.
Okay, for the mayor's report, I just have a couple things. I'm extremely proud of all the work that our staff has done to get us through the budget that we just talked about a little bit. I mean, there was a lot of work last month for everybody to get through that, and that's just greatly appreciated, all the time and effort that went into that. I'm extremely proud of the way the town park has turned out, and I really appreciate everybody's efforts on there. From a board perspective, that was the most painless project I've ever been through. Getting those weekly updates and you all just handling everything, it was just, it's how it's supposed to be, and it's wonderful that we can depend on you all for that. I know that there's some frustration from the residents, but I want them to understand and realize how much goes into the rollout of a successful paid parking project. It's not something we want to cause additional issues with on a Saturday or Sunday. From my perspective, we've got safety issues that you can't even get off or on the island several times during the course of the day on a Saturday or Sunday. You've got to go somewhere, you might as well bring the chopper in, because you're just not getting out. So we as a board are taking into consideration all of the feedback we've gotten from the planning board, all of the feedback we've gotten from staff's recommendation to meet with the vendor, to have him come here and run through the town with us, so that when we do roll this out, we're doing it in an appropriate fashion. We don't just have everybody now parking in everybody's yards, because nobody wants to pay their money in the lot. So there's a lot that goes into that. The Phase 5 project, we talked in significant detail tonight. There are financial issues that the town has got to get our arms around. Once we figure out exactly what this project is estimated to cost us as a town and everybody as taxpayers, to find out if there's any additional financial help we can get, we are going to be posting information and asking for feedback from the citizens, because we want to hear that. We as a board are not just sitting here trying to make decisions that impact everybody else as well for 50 years to come. We talked about the groin, that isn't making any progress, and that's not to put blame anywhere, but we need to try and push the Corps along a little bit with that. And if they need some help from us, if the virus has turned to be a problem, then maybe we can help with some Zoom meetings or something to get that moving. And the other thing I would ask the residents of North Topsail Beach to continue to be is patient with us as a town. I understand there's frustration and people wanting to get back to normal. We have got to take into consideration the safety of the residents as well as the safety of our staff members. So that is why we're still in a virtual setting today. I don't think there's any board member here who would disagree with that. We would love to be back to normal. And I would love COVID to be gone, but it's not. And that's why town hall is still closed to the public as well. So these are just things that we're gonna have to continue to ask for some patience from everybody on. I don't know if I left anything for anybody else to say. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to echo some of your thoughts that you just went over. And I would really like to ask our residents and property owners to have some patience these next few days, because traffic is gonna be crazy in town. And we have seen from the get-go, once we reopened our public parking lots, this virus has really caused people to change their lifestyles. And one thing that they feel they can do to get out of the house is go to the beach. And so we are going to continue to have a large number of day visitors coming to our beach, trying to find a little bit of sand to enjoy the beach. So those of us that live here full-time, we're just gonna have to have some patience this weekend and not get too upset with the situation. The other thing I wanted to mention goes back to the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission. The North Carolina Coastal Federation is now a partner with the Shoreline Protection Commission. And one of the projects that the Federation is working on is what they call their marine debris cleanup, which is a project not only to clean up the marshes, intercoastal waterway, the beaches. It's amazing how many tons of debris these different projects have collected so far. But I wanted to mention that not only is it a cleanup debris thing, but they also, part of the program is prevention, education, to educate the public. And just one example is like a collection vessel for used monofilament fishing lines, so it just doesn't get left on the beach or in the coastal water. So I volunteered to become a part of that program for our town, and I'll be working with town staff to develop some of these education materials and possibly some projects, for instance, collecting the used monofilament line, as well as maybe coordinating some marine cleanup days. So I just wanted everyone to know about that effort, that we are partnering with conservation groups to try to limit the amount of debris we have in our waterways. Thank you.
Alderman Graham?
Just a couple of things. One is, I appreciate the discussion we're having, with Mr. Benson and I, with where we can spend the money. I think that that's the starting point, as you pointed out, Mayor, is let's figure out how much money we've got and then prioritize the projects. We do have issues around the fire department, it's the South Station, those type of things. I think that we need to make sure that we educate all of our citizens about that, because I think the things that I've read, and I try to stay off some of that and stuff, is that basically everybody thinks it's free because they think it's a federal project, and it's not. Second thing is, and without going into, on the parking stuff, I agree, and I think with both of you making your comments about that, but I would also give town manager of the police department some kudos, because they are writing tickets now. And so instead of getting $10, we're getting $50 for a lot of that stuff. And I'm seeing a lot of those vehicles, particularly out in front of my house, I see a lot of vehicles being ticketed. And they're smart, because some of the people park on private property, and we talked about that. Actually, I talked to the chief about that, where you can't write tickets if somebody's, you got vacant lots and people are parking in that. So it's not like we're losing everything. And I think I mentioned, I stopped at the four-wheel drive there, and I was talking to guys a couple weekends ago, and he said they have like $10,000 on that parking meter. So we are getting some of the parking stuff. The last thing I wanted to mention, and we've talked about it before, I don't know if it was Alderman Benson or Mr. Leonard, the mayor, whoever was talking about it. It doesn't have to be a formal committee, but we've talked about trying to do something for the town in the fall.
Yes.
We can start pulling the town together for the people that live here, okay? Whether it, I think you mentioned either at the north end with a tiki bar in the park or something like that. And like, it would be a volunteer type of thing. I'm not volunteering her, but I told my wife said she would get involved in it. No, but I think it's something we need to do as a town. is
Maybe
that-
somebody needs to spearhead it.
That's fine. That's fine. You know, and if you want me to, I'll take a look at it and try to set something up. I just think it's important because I think we gotta get town pride.
I think if we don't start now, then the fall will come and go and we won't have something, so
Could not
I
agree
would
more.
greatly appreciate it, and
Okay.
I'd be more than happy to participate and volunteer.
Yeah.
But I just don't have the time to drive.
And like I said, I think it's gotta be something where you get, it's gotta be the citizens that wanna do it. It can't be just the aldermen
I'm sure
and
that,
and drive
the
that stuff.
feedback I get, I think
People would
everybody,
love to do it.
yes.
No, I
Okay.
talked about this last time, but I would be involved in that.
That'd be perfect. Nope, we work together on it, but that's fine. But I think it's something that's important to the town. So with that, that's all I've done.
Alderman Peters?
Well, I'll say two or three things. First, in regard to what Mike is talking about, trash pickups and things like that. For several years, the Sierra Club from out of Greenville
Mhm.
came down and picked up trash on the beach and around the island. And that island is really where it's very badly needed,
Yep.
so just bear that in mind, Mike, that it isn't only the beach that needs cleanup. So anyway, number two,
Mhm.
I mentioned to you, Mr. Kilbride,
Yes, sir.
about a roundabout.
Yes, sir.
You approached the police chief and he seems negative on it. My thought is, what in the heck does he want to do?
Well,
I mean,
have you been to Surf City, Mr. Peters, on a Saturday?
well,
It's not working all that well, I don't think
isn't
personally.
it? Okay.
No, it's not, it backs up from Surf City, it'll back up all the way to Lowe's on a Saturday. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I made that
that's my
mistake
question.
one Saturday going that way and I was shocked because we
Right.
figured we were missing the people coming in and they weren't.
no, and in theory, it's supposed to work better, I agree with you, but I'm not seeing that in practice just yet.
But honestly, having moved to the northeast where they're very common, we don't drive them right down here. It takes a while for people to get, you know, some of the people I was working out with in the gym were talking about, they were so scared about what to do in the roundabouts. If you do them correctly, they work,
It's
but
also
they
very
take a time.
narrow in Surf City.
But it's also understanding that you can pull out this, you don't know what this
I know.
person's doing and so it takes a while to get
And
used to it.
every week, we get a whole new group of people here during the summer that have to learn how to drive the roundabout.
You got it.
And that's- Learning curve never goes away.
So I would say, Mr. Peters, I don't disagree that we've got a traffic issue that we're hoping to address on a couple different fronts. But maybe we watch Surf City just a little bit longer and see if that starts to improve there.
What are we talking about?
I,
A roundabout near the town hall.
Island
And-
Drive.
There's
As
not
I
even-
recall-
I don't even think there's physically the ability to plant one there, but who knows?
Yeah, as I recall speaking to a chief, he felt it could be a viable option if we could make it 2 lanes, as opposed to just a 1 lane as in Surf City. And we kind of left it at that. He's had surgery today. So if we can get it done before he gets back, we'll be in good shape.
He'll have no comments on it.
Yeah,
then.
exactly.
anyway, I bring it up again
Yes, sir.
because something needs to be done.
Yeah.
And we need to get in line with the DOT, Transportation Department,
Sure.
and get their assistance. And if not a roundabout,
Right.
what?
Well, you're right. A couple of weeks back when we had the accidents on the bridge and on the road there, it was just a nightmare.
At 10 o'clock, they were still in front of our house.
Yeah. so-
They were still at, almost to the St. Regis at 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, really.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you doing for emergencies?
That's the problem.
I mean,
Yep.
they're occurring like crazy here.
Sure.
So it's I've been just encouraging us to move it up on the importance list.
Okay. No, I'll revisit it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Peters?
Thirdly, yes, Alderman Grant has emphasized twice that the 1% is in the budget. But I don't think there's anything in that budget for parking income.
There is some parking income in there.
Well,
Well,
just
Well, I
the
mean, there's a
established
small
one.
account for the north end,
Right, north end.
but,
nothing new.
but if we can get something accomplished even tonight on this, we could start getting some income from it. I mean, I agree 100% with the citizen who wrote the letter that you read earlier.
Dixon, yeah.
And it is, we're wasting time.
It's underway.
Even,
It's underway.
and so let's
Yes, sir.
get something in, and
Yes, sir. And that's, it's the obvious low-hanging fruit to boost our revenue. So yeah, we'll push it as quickly as we can. As soon as we have the people out here next week, we'll get the plan done and we'll have something to present to the board, but
And we can
we'll
have a
be on our
special
way.
meeting if
Oh,
if
sure.
they
They
have
have
it.
it done.
I do that.
You should.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
As soon
agree.
as it's ready, we have a special meeting and we move forward that way. We don't have to wait
No.
until August, right?
yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be good.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Meyer?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for watching tonight, and I'm excited about joining this board, and I think that we're moving forward nicely. I feel like even considering the COVID-19, which makes everything a little more difficult, we're able to keep things going, and it's nice to know. So anyway,
ma'am.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Alderman?
First, I'd like to wish our police chief, Bill Youngner, a speedy recovery. I spoke with him yesterday. He seemed to be in good spirits. He was due to have surgery today. Again, a speedy recovery to Bill. I'd like to wish everyone a happy Independence Day. Parking, we have a meeting with the vendor scheduled next week. This is progressing, it is moving forward. And I'm excited to see us continue to push forward on the paid parking. If the north end is any indicator with the paid parking, when we go to paid parking for the remainder of the town, it may, at least initially, give us some relief from our traffic woes.
I think so too.
That happened, watching the constant parade of big trucks with big exhausts, with big black plumes of smoke, going up to enjoy nature's tranquil beauty after they've polluted the air on the way up and back. We saw two things happen up there. We saw first a real decrease initially of who was going, of numbers, and then we saw as people started coming back, a different group of people coming back. It went back to families going out for the day, putting up a shelter, and kids playing with the ball and all that. It wasn't the group with the loud trucks and trying to do donuts when the cops weren't there and that kind of stuff. So we may see some relief by people who just say, I'm not going to North Topsail Beach because I have to pay. I'll go to the beach at Surf City, Topsail Beach, Camp Lejeune, somewhere else. So we may see a little bit of relief. It's going to be short-lived. Our problem is all these developments going up in this area, all of them advertising themselves as just minutes to the beach. It's not going away. You go down to this stoplight, you make a left or a right, and you see all the areas that used to be forest that are now plowed down and they're building houses. It's here to stay. We need a solution. I don't know what it is. I think paid parking is part of it, because at a point, when we have paid parking, we also have a sign somewhere, hopefully, that says, kind of like at the airport, lot full. Okay? And sorry, get up earlier next weekend. So I don't know what the real solution is there, but I think paid parking is a big step in the right direction. The reason that we tonight are virtual with our audience, which I appreciate them tuning in, is because the governor tightened things back down on Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. That's why. That's the difference between the hearing and the meeting last week, the budget meeting and the public hearing over Rogers Bay, and tonight. It was the governor's order that was effective at 5 p.m. on Friday evening. The groin, funding on the groin, we need to engage our state representatives to sponsor a bill at the state level that will exempt our town from the requirement to be able to pay for the groin up front, and to allow us to do some financing for the groin. And that's something that, Dave, I'd like to maybe sit down with you and maybe you, Joanne, and maybe we kind of figure out, what we need to do, but this is something that we were working on, and it's another one of those that we need to get Phil Shepherd and Harry Brown engaged with us, and if they pass a special bill exempting us from the requirement to be able to pay for the groin up front, then we could finance it. Assuming that we could finance it, we'd have a financing option open to us that would make this thing a little bit easier. As it is right now, the rules are written that you can't finance the groin, you have to pay for it up front. So, and again, everybody have a happy and safe 4th.
Okay. Do we have a, motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second? Aye.
We're in closed session.